The great chamber of the Galactic Concord was silent. 1,200 species had sent their representatives to this place, and now all of them waited for the High Arbiter to speak. The walls of the chamber stretched upward into darkness, carved from the bones of a dead moon. Light came from floating crystals that drifted slowly through the air, like lazy fireflies. High Arbiter Velkith stood at the center of the chamber. He was tall and thin, with gray skin that looked like stone. His eyes were completely black, and when he moved, his robes made no sound at all. He had held his position for 300 years, and in that time, he had ordered the destruction of 17 worlds. Each decision had been correct. Each decision had been necessary. The Concord did not destroy civilizations for pleasure. They destroyed them to protect the galaxy from threats that could not be reasoned with today. They would discuss Terra. Velkith raised one long hand, and a holographic image appeared in the center of the chamber. It showed a small blue world, covered mostly in water, with patches of green and brown land. White clouds swirled across its surface. It was, by galactic standards, an unremarkable planet in an unremarkable solar system, but the creatures that lived on it were very remarkable indeed. Terra, Velkith said, his voice carrying to every corner of the chamber without effort. Third planet from a yellow star in the outer arm of the galaxy. Dominant species calls itself human. They have been monitored for 3 of their centuries. Another image appeared. This one showed the humans themselves. They were soft-bodied creatures, walking on 2 legs, with delicate skin in various shades of brown and pink. They had no claws, no natural armor, no venom. By every measure, they should have been prey animals. Instead, they had conquered their entire world. The assessment team has completed its final report, Velkith continued. He did not need to consult any documents. He had memorized everything. The humans have demonstrated consistent patterns of extreme aggression. They wage war against each other with disturbing frequency. They have developed weapons capable of destroying their own civilization several times over. They have poisoned their air, their water, and their soil in their rush to expand and consume. The chamber remained silent, but Velkith could feel the mood shifting. The representatives were not surprised by this information. They had seen species like this before. The galaxy was old, and it had learned hard lessons about what happened when aggressive civilizations were allowed to spread beyond their home worlds. Furthermore, Velkith said, they have begun to reach beyond their planet. They have sent machines to other worlds in their system. They have placed satellites in orbit around their planet. Their radio signals now extend several dozen light years into space. He paused. They are waking up, and when they fully wake, they will look outward with hungry eyes. A representative from the Velith Consortium raised a tentacle. High Arbiter, have attempts been made to contact them? To guide them toward peaceful development? Velkith shook his head slowly. The assessment team considered this option and rejected it. The humans are too fractured. They cannot even agree among themselves on basic matters of governance and resource distribution. They have no unified voice to speak for their species. Any attempt at contact would likely accelerate their technological development, while doing nothing to address their violent tendencies. The risk is too great. Another representative spoke up. This one was from a species that looked like walking crystals, and their voice chimed like bells. What is the recommendation? Velkith let the question hang in the air for a long moment. Then he spoke the words that everyone already knew were coming. Sterilization. Complete and total. The fleet will reduce the planet's surface to glass, eliminating all complex life. The process will be quick. The humans will not suffer. He said this last part as if it were a kindness, and perhaps it was. The Concord was not cruel. They simply did what was necessary that the vote was taken. It was not unanimous, but it was overwhelming. Terra would die. Far across the galaxy, the sterilization fleet received its orders and changed course. 12 Paramount-class world breakers, each one larger than most moons, began their long journey toward the little blue planet. They would arrive in approximately 40 of the humans' years. This was considered a short timeline. The Concorde wanted to act before the humans developed faster than light travel. Once a species could move between stars, sterilization became much more difficult. The decision made, the chamber began to empty. Representatives returned to their ships, their duties complete. In 40 years, they would receive confirmation that Terra had been cleansed, and they would move on to other business. The galaxy was vast, and there was always more work to be done. But as the chamber emptied, a small vessel was already speeding toward the human system. The Silent Witness was a monitoring ship, designed for observation rather than combat. Its crew of 47 had spent the last 20 years studying Terra from a safe distance. And now they had been given one final task: complete documentation of the human civilization before its destruction. This was standard procedure. The Concorde kept records of every species they eliminated. It was considered important to remember what had been lost, even when the loss was necessary. Future generations would study these records and understand why such difficult decisions had to be made. Commander Yethra stood on the bridge of the Silent Witness and watched Terra grow larger on her view screen. She was a veteran officer with 40 years of service, and she had documented 11 species before this one. The work was never pleasant, but she understood its importance. "Begin full-spectrum monitoring," she ordered. "I want everything. Visual, audio, electromagnetic. Capture their art, their music, their literature. Record their cities, their cultures, their daily lives. When we are finished, I want anyone who accesses our archive to understand exactly what the humans were." Her crew moved to obey. Around Terra, hidden satellites activated and began their work. Every television broadcast, every radio signal, every piece of data that the humans sent through their primitive networks would be captured and preserved. Yethra settled into her command chair and prepared for a long assignment. She expected to find what she always found: a species that had chosen violence over cooperation, expansion over sustainability, war over peace. The humans would prove that the Concorde's decision was correct. They always did. She did not expect what she actually found. She did not expect to have her entire understanding of the universe turned upside down by a golden disk and a few simple words. But that would come later. For now, the Silent Witness watched and waited. And the great fleet of world breakers continued its slow journey toward Terra, carrying enough firepower to turn a living world into a dead one. And on Terra itself, 8 billion humans went about their lives, completely unaware that their existence had been weighed, measured, and found wanting. They fell in love and raised children. They built buildings and wrote songs. They argued about politics and laughed at jokes. They lived. They did not know that they had already been sentenced to death. They did not know that their only hope lay in a small monitoring ship and a commander who was about to discover something that would change everything. Commander Yethra had not slept in 6 rotations. This was dangerous for her species. Her people needed regular rest, or their minds began to suffer. But every time she tried to close her eyes, she saw another image from Terra, heard another piece of music, read another translation of human writing. And she could not look away. Her crew was experiencing the same problem. The Silent Witness had become a ship of ghosts, with officers wandering the corridors at all hours, their eyes distant and troubled. Something was happening to all of them, and Yethra did not know how to stop it. It had started simply enough. The first transmissions they captured were news broadcasts, and these seemed to confirm everything the Concorde believed about humans. War, violence, crime, political conflict. The humans fought each other constantly, over resources, over territory, over ideas. They built weapons and pointed them at each other. They said cruel things and did cruel things. But then the translation software began processing other transmissions, and the picture became more complicated. There were stories. So many stories. The humans seemed obsessed with creating fictional narratives. They wrote books and made films and produced shows that played on their visual screens. At first, Yethra thought this was simply entertainment, a way to pass time. But as she watched more and more of these stories, she began to understand that they were something else entirely. The humans used stories to explore their own nature. They created heroes who represented what they wanted to be. They created villains who represented what they feared becoming. They told tales of sacrifice and redemption, of love and loss, of ordinary individuals doing extraordinary things. In one story, a human ran into a burning building to save a child he had never met. In another, a group of humans traveled across a war zone to bring medicine to sick people. In another, a human gave up everything she owned to help strangers from another country. These are fictions, Lieutenant Kress pointed out when Yethra shared her observations. They are not real. The humans create idealized versions of themselves. Yes, Yethra agreed. But why? Why would a violent species constantly tell itself stories about kindness and sacrifice? Why would they create heroes who represent values they do not actually practice? Kress did not have an answer. The music was even more confusing. The Concord had encountered musical species before, but the humans were different. They did not have one type of music. They had hundreds, thousands. Every human culture seemed to produce its own sounds, its own rhythms, its own ways of expressing emotion through organized noise. Some of the music was clearly aggressive. The humans called it various names, and it featured screaming voices and harsh instruments. But even this angry music seemed to serve a purpose. The humans used it to express pain, to process trauma, to connect with others who felt the same way. Other music was soft and gentle. One piece, created by a human named Johann Sebastian Bach, was so mathematically perfect that Yethra's science officer spent 3 days analyzing it and emerged weeping. The humans had discovered universal mathematical truths and turned them into sound. They had made numbers beautiful. And then there were the love songs. Millions of them. The humans sang about love constantly, in every language, in every style. They sang about finding love and losing love, about wanting love and fearing love. It was as if they were desperately trying to express something the words alone could not capture. They feel things very deeply, Yethra said to herself one night. Alone in her quarters, listening to a human song about a man who missed his home. They feel everything, and they cannot stop trying to share those feelings with others. The science was the biggest surprise of all. Yethra had expected to find that the humans kept their knowledge secret. Every advanced species the Concord had encountered guarded their scientific discoveries carefully. Knowledge was power, and power was survival. You did not give away your advantages, but the humans did exactly that. They had something called the Internet, a global network that connected all their computing devices together. And on this network, they shared their knowledge freely. Scientific papers were published and distributed. Educational materials were made available to anyone who wanted them. Humans who discovered new things seemed almost eager to tell everyone else about their discoveries. They have institutions dedicated entirely to spreading knowledge, the science officer reported, his voice shaking slightly. Schools, universities, libraries, research centers. They argue about access and funding, yes, but the underlying assumption is that knowledge should be shared. They believe that everyone benefits when everyone knows more. That is not logical, Yethra said. If you share your knowledge, others can use it against you. Yes, Commander. And yet they do it anyway. They have been doing it for their entire history. They seem to believe that the benefits of shared knowledge outweigh the risks. Yethra sat with this information for a long time. The Concord had existed for millions of years, and in all that time, they had never encountered a species that willingly gave away its scientific advantages. It simply was not done. And yet here were the humans, broadcasting their physics and chemistry and biology to anyone who cared to listen. They were also broadcasting their mistakes. The humans documented their failures as carefully as their successes. They studied what went wrong and tried to learn from it. They wrote books about their wars and their atrocities, not to celebrate them, but to understand them. They seemed to believe that by examining their own darkness, they could somehow find their way toward the light. One night, very late, Yethra found a transmission that broke something inside her. It was a visual recording of a human funeral. An old woman had died, and her family had gathered to remember her. One by one, they stood and spoke about what she had meant to them. They cried. They laughed. They held each other. And at the end, they released balloons into the sky, watching them float upward until they disappeared. "She is gone," one of the humans said, "but the love she gave us will never go away. We carry it with us. We pass it on to others. That is how we honor her memory." Yethra watched this recording 17 times. Each time, she felt something strange happening in her chest. It took her a while to recognize the sensation. She was mourning. She was mourning a species that was still alive. She was mourning 8 billion individuals she had never met, who would die without ever knowing why. She was mourning all the songs that would never be written, all the stories that would never be told, all the love that would never be shared. She was mourning humans, and in that moment, she knew that she could not let the sterilization proceed. She did not know how she would stop it. She did not know if it was even possible. But she knew that she had to try. She began preparing her report for the High Arbiter. It would be the most important document she had ever written. Everything depended on getting it exactly right. And somewhere in the depths of space, the fleet of world breakers continued its slow journey toward Terra, unaware that a single commander on a small monitoring ship was about to challenge the oldest institution in the galaxy. The object was small. That was the first thing the crew of the Silent Witness noticed about it. It was barely larger than a human ground vehicle, drifting alone in the cold darkness between stars. It had no weapons, no shields, no engines capable of faster-than-light travel. By every standard, the Concord used to measure technological advancement. It was primitive almost beyond belief. And yet it would change the fate of an entire world. Lieutenant Kress was the one who first detected it. The Silent Witness had been conducting a survey of the outer regions of the human solar system when her sensors picked up an unusual signature. At first, she thought it was debris, a piece of rock or ice tumbling through space. But the more she studied it, the more she realized that it was artificial. "Commander," she said, her voice careful and controlled, "I have found something. It appears to be a human vessel, but it is different." Yethra came to stand beside her, studying the sensor readings. "Different how?" "It is moving away from the human system, not toward it. And its trajectory suggests it was launched many of their years ago, possibly before the humans even sent living beings into space." Yethra felt something stir in her chest. Curiosity, perhaps, or something deeper. "Bring it aboard," she ordered. "I want to see it for myself." The retrieval took several hours. The object was fragile, and the crew had to be careful not to damage it. When they finally brought it into the cargo bay, Yethra stood before it and simply stared. It was beautiful in its simplicity. A gold-colored dish attached to a basic framework of metal and electronics. Instruments for measuring things, cameras for taking pictures, and a power source that had been slowly dying for decades. The humans had built this with the technology of children, and they had sent it out into the endless dark. But why? The answer came when they found the disk dot. It was attached to the side of the vessel, protected by a special cover. The disk itself was made of gold-plated copper, and on its surface, the humans had engraved instructions. Pictures and symbols that explained how to play the disk, how to decode its contents, how to understand its message. They expected someone to find this, Jethro whispered. They built this knowing that it might take thousands of years to reach another star. They built it hoping that someone somewhere would discover it. The science officer worked through the night to decode the disk's contents. What he found left the entire crew speechless. There were sounds. The sound of wind and rain and thunder. The sound of animals, birds singing, and whales calling across vast oceans. The sound of human footsteps, of laughter, of a mother singing to her child. The humans had recorded the sounds of their world and sent them into space like a message in a bottle dot. There was music. 27 different pieces, representing cultures from all across Terra. Some was formal and structured, some was wild and free, but all of it was deeply, unmistakably alive. The humans had chosen these songs to represent their species, and they had chosen well. There were greetings. 55 different human languages, each one saying some version of the same thing. Hello, we are here. We wish you peace and happiness. There were images. Pictures of human bodies, showing their structure and form. Pictures of human families, gathered together. Pictures of human cities and human landscapes and human achievements. The humans had created a portrait of themselves, honest and complete, and offered it to the universe. And there was a map dot. This was the part that broke Jethro's heart. The humans had included precise instructions for finding Terra. They had drawn a diagram showing the location of their sun relative to nearby stars. They had provided everything a finder would need to travel directly to their home world. They knew, Jethro said, her voice barely above a whisper. They knew this probe might be found by hostile species. They knew it might lead enemies to their doorstep. And they sent it anyway. Lieutenant Kress stood beside her, staring at the golden disk. Why would they do that? It makes no tactical sense. No, Jethro agreed. It makes no tactical sense at all. But it makes perfect emotional sense. She touched the disk gently, feeling the grooves where the humans had etched their message. They were lonely. They looked up at the night sky and wondered if they were alone in the universe. And their loneliness was stronger than their fear. She thought about the sterilization fleet, still traveling toward Terra. She thought about the 12 world breakers and the terrible weapons they carried. She thought about 8 billion humans who had no idea what was coming for them. And she thought about this small golden disk, carrying its message of hope into the void. The humans had reached out with open hands. They had said hello to a universe that might want to destroy them. They had taken the greatest risk imaginable, not for conquest or resources, but simply because they wanted to know if anyone else was out there. Pull the complete archive together, Jethro ordered. Everything we have collected. The music, the stories, the science, the funeral ceremonies, all of it. And add the Voyager data to the top of the file. What are you planning, Commander? Kress asked. I am going to send a message to High Arbiter Velketh. I am going to ask him to delay the fleet. Kress stared at her. Commander, that is. The Concord has not changed a sterilization order in 10,000 years. What makes you think they will listen? Jethro looked at the golden disk one more time. She thought about the humans who had built it, who had gathered their songs and their greetings and their hopes, and who had sent them into the darkness with nothing but faith that someone might find them. Because this changes everything, she said. This disk is not a weapon or a warning. It is a gift. The humans sent their most precious possession, their culture, their identity, their very soul, out into space as a gift for anyone who might want it. They gave themselves to the universe without knowing if the universe would accept them or destroy them. She turned to face her crew, all of whom had gathered to see the artifact. The Concorde destroys species that pose a threat. But look at this. Look at what they chose to send as their first message to the galaxy. Not warships, not demands, not threats. They sent music. They sent greetings. They sent a picture of themselves with their hands raised in peace. She paused. The humans are not a threat. They are a treasure, and I will not let them be destroyed without a fight. The message was composed and transmitted that very hour. Yethra knew it might cost her everything, her career, her reputation, possibly even her freedom. The Concorde did not like being challenged, but as she watched the golden disc sitting in the cargo bay, she realized that she did not care. Some things were worth risking everything for. The humans had taught her that. The great chamber of the Galactic Concorde had never experienced anything like this. Representatives from 1,200 species filled every seat, and thousands more watched through viewing screens across the galaxy. The air itself seemed to vibrate with tension and uncertainty died at the center of the chamber. Commander Yethra stood alone. She had been summoned from the Silent Witness to answer for her transmission to High Arbiter Velkith. Many had expected her to be arrested. Some had expected her to be executed. Instead, Velkith had done something completely unexpected. He had called a full session of the Concorde to hear her evidence. "You have made serious claims." "Commander," Velkith said, his voice calm and cold, "you have suggested that our decision regarding Terra was made in error. You have requested that we halt the sterilization fleet. These are not small matters." "I understand, High Arbiter," Yethra replied. Her voice was steady, though her hearts were pounding. "I do not make these claims lightly. I have evidence that the Concorde must see, then show us." Yethra activated the holographic display. The chamber went dark, and suddenly the golden disc appeared, floating in the air like a second sun. Around it, images began to form. The Voyager spacecraft, the instructions etched into the disc's cover, the contents that the humans had chosen to include. "This is the Voyager Golden Record," Yethra said. "The humans launched it into space more than 40 of their years ago. At that time, they had barely begun to explore beyond their own world. They had no faster-than-light capability. They had no way to defend themselves against an advanced civilization. They were, by every measure, vulnerable." She let the images speak for themselves. The greetings in 55 languages. The music from around the world. The sounds of Earth, its winds and oceans and living creatures. "And yet they sent this," she continued. "They sent a message into the void, knowing that whoever received it might be hostile. They included a map to their home world. They showed exactly where to find them." She paused, letting the weight of this sink in. They did not send weapons or warnings. They sent an invitation. Arbiter Krellox rose from his seat, his massive form casting shadows across the chamber. "This proves nothing. The humans are still violent. They still wage war. They are still a threat. Are they?" Yethra asked. She changed the display, and now the chamber was filled with images of humans helping other humans. Rescue workers pulling survivors from collapsed buildings. Doctors treating the sick and wounded. Volunteers feeding the hungry, sheltering the homeless, comforting the grieving. "Yes, the humans fight," Yethra said. "They have conflicts and wars and violence. I do not deny this. But look at what else they do. When disaster strikes, they run toward the danger, not away from it. When strangers suffer, they reach out to help. They build hospitals and schools and charities. They create organizations dedicated to protecting their planet and the creatures that share it with them." "These are exceptions," Krellox insisted. The dominant pattern is aggression. No, Yethra said firmly. Aggression is the exception. The dominant pattern is cooperation. 8 billion humans live on Terra, and every single day, most of them choose peace. They go to work, they raise their children, they help their neighbors. The wars and conflicts that we see in our reports represent a tiny fraction of human activity. We have been looking at the exceptions and calling them the rule. She brought up more images. Human art in all its forms. Paintings and sculptures and architecture. Books and poems and plays. Music of every kind, from simple folk songs to complex symphonies. They create beauty, Yethra said. Not for survival, not for practical purposes, but simply because they can. They look at the universe, and their response is to make it more beautiful. They take their pain and their joy and their fear and their hope, and they transform it into art. What kind of threat does that represent? The chamber was silent. Representatives looked at each other, uncertain. I have more evidence, Yethra said. She changed the display again, and now scientific equations floated through the air. The humans share their knowledge freely. They have something called open source, where they give away their discoveries so that others can benefit. They have universities that educate anyone who wants to learn. They believe that knowledge should belong to everyone. This makes them more dangerous, not less, another arbiter argued. If they share knowledge freely, they will advance quickly. They will become a greater threat. Or, Yethra said, they will share that knowledge with us. They will share it with everyone. Is that not what we claim to want? A galaxy where species cooperate and grow together. The humans already believe in this. They already practice it. She took a deep breath. This was the moment everything hinged on. I have studied the humans for years, she said. I have watched them at their worst and at their best. I have seen them commit terrible acts and incredible acts of kindness. And I have come to a conclusion that I never expected to reach. She looked directly at High Arbiter Velkith. The humans are not a threat to the galaxy. They are a gift to it. They are messy and complicated, and yes, sometimes violent. But they are also brave and creative and loving. They reach out to the unknown with open hands. They hope for the best, even when they fear the worst. They sent their music into space because they dreamed of making friends among the stars. She gestured at the golden disk, still floating in the center of the chamber. This is who they are. Not their weapons, not their wars, not their worst moments. This, a message of hope, sent into the darkness by a species that did not know if anyone would ever hear it. They chose to introduce themselves with beauty and peace. They chose to be vulnerable. They chose to trust. Velkith had listened without expression throughout Yethra's presentation. Now, finally, he spoke. The Concord has destroyed 17 species in my time as High Arbiter. Each decision was made carefully, based on evidence and analysis. Each decision protected the galaxy from genuine threats. He paused. But I have never seen evidence like this. I have never encountered a species that sent its art and music into space as a first contact message. I have never seen a civilization that's so desperate to find friends rather than enemies. He rose to his full height, his black eyes reflecting the light of the golden disk. The evidence Commander Yethra has presented raises questions that we cannot ignore. The humans may indeed be violent, but they are also capable of extraordinary compassion. They may wage war, but they also create beauty. They may be dangerous, but they are also reaching out to us with open hands. He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of representatives from 1,000 worlds. I am ordering the sterilization fleet to halt its approach to Terra. This matter will be reconsidered. The humans deserve at least that much. The chamber exploded into noise. Some representatives cheered, others shouted in anger, still others sat in stunned silence. But Yethra heard none of it. She was staring at the golden disk, tears streaming down her face. The humans did not know it yet, but they had just been given a second chance, all because they had dared to send a message of hope into the void. 12 years had passed since the Galactic Concord made its decision about Terra. 12 years since the sterilization fleet had stopped its approach. 12 years since Commander Yethra had stood in the Great Chamber and argued for the survival of a species she had never met. The humans knew nothing of this. They continued their lives, completely unaware of how close they had come to extinction. They built their cities and raised their children. They created art and made scientific discoveries. They argued with each other and loved each other and dreamed of the future. And they kept looking at the stars. Dr. Elena Vasquez had spent her entire adult life listening to the cosmos. She worked at a radio telescope facility high in the mountains of Chile, where the air was thin and cold, and the sky was so clear that you could see forever. Every night, she pointed her instruments at the heavens and listened for something, anything that might prove humanity was not alone. Most of her colleagues thought she was wasting her time. After decades of searching, humanity had found nothing. No signals, no messages, no evidence of other civilizations. The universe seemed empty and silent, and many scientists had concluded that humans were probably alone. Elena refused to believe this. She kept listening. On the night everything changed, she was tired. It had been a long shift, and she was ready to go home. The computers were recording data automatically, as they always did. She did not expect to find anything unusual, but then her screen flickered. At first, she thought it was a glitch. The pattern that appeared made no sense. It was too regular to be natural, too complex to be random noise. She ran it through her analysis software, then ran it again, then ran it a third time. Each time, the result was the same. This was not natural. This was artificial. This was a signal. Alana's hands were shaking as she pulled up the frequency analysis. The signal was coming from a point in space that seemed empty, but when she checked the historical records, she realized something incredible. The direction matched the trajectory of Voyager 1, the probe that humanity had launched more than 50 years ago. Someone had found the golden record, and they had sent a reply. It took 3 days for the world's best linguists and mathematicians to decode the message. The beings who sent it had studied the Voyager disk carefully. They had learned from the mathematical sequences included on the record, and they had used those same sequences to structure their response. It was brilliant and elegant, a conversation built across light years using the language of numbers. The message began with mathematics, simple equations that proved the senders understood the basics. Then it moved to more complex concepts, building a shared vocabulary from first principles. And finally, at the end, it contained something that made Elena cry. Music. The beings had sent music of their own. It was strange and beautiful, built from sounds that human instruments could not produce. But the structure was unmistakable. These beings, whoever they were, had listened to Bach and Beethoven and Chuck Berry, and they had responded with their own songs. And there were words. Translated through the mathematical framework that both species now shared, the message was clear. We heard you. We are here too. You are not alone. Your songs are beautiful. We would like to learn more. The announcement was made on a Tuesday morning. Every television station, every radio channel, every website in the world carried the same story. Humanity had received a message from the stars. First contact had been made. People reacted in different ways. Some celebrated, dancing in the streets and hugging strangers. Some prayed, falling to their knees in gratitude or fear. Some cried, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what had happened. And some simply stood still, staring up at the sky, trying to comprehend a universe that had suddenly become much larger and much less lonely. In the years that followed, more messages were exchanged. The beings revealed themselves slowly, carefully, respecting humanity's need to adjust to this new reality. They shared knowledge about the galaxy, about other civilizations, about the great Concord that had watched over the stars for millions of years. They did not tell the humans about the sterilization order. Not at first. That revelation would come later, when humanity was ready to hear it. When they learned how close they had come to extinction, and how their own message of hope had saved them. What they did tell the humans was this: the galaxy had been watching. The galaxy had been listening. And the galaxy had been impressed. "You are young," the being said. "You are violent and messy and still learning to be wise. But you sent your songs into the darkness. You reached out with open hands. You hoped for the best, even when you feared the worst. This is rare. This is precious. This is why you were allowed to live." Commander Yethra, now an ambassador rather than a military officer, was chosen to lead the first diplomatic mission to Terra. She had argued for humanity's survival, and now she would be the one to greet them. Her ship entered the human solar system on a bright summer day. Millions of humans gathered to watch her vessel descend through the atmosphere, a silver teardrop that landed gently in a field of green grass. When the door opened and Yethra stepped out into the sunlight, she found herself facing a crowd of humans who were crying and laughing and reaching toward her. One human stepped forward from the crowd. She was old, with white hair and kind eyes, and she held something in her hands. It was a copy of the Golden Record, the same disc that had changed everything. "Welcome to Earth," the old woman said. "We've been waiting for you." Yethra took the disc gently, holding it as carefully as she had held the original years ago. She thought about everything that had happened since that day in the cargo bay of the Silent Witness. She thought about the chamber full of representatives, the decision that had spared a world, the years of preparation for this moment. "Thank you for sending this," she said. "Thank you for hoping. Thank you for being brave enough to say hello." The old woman smiled, and Yethra saw in her eyes the same fierce, gentle spirit that had sent Voyager into the darkness. "Thank you for listening," the human replied. "Thank you for giving us a chance." Around them, humans and aliens stood together beneath a blue sky, united by a message of hope that had traveled across the stars. It was the beginning of a new chapter, not just for humanity, but for the entire galaxy. And it had all started with a golden disc and a simple dream that somewhere out there, someone might want to be friends. The humans had bet everything on that dream, and they had won.